When we talk about this incredible defensive line class that Miami's bringing in, certain names get brought up more than others. I'm watching the Under Armour All-America game yesterday, and Booker Pickett Jr. looked, quite frankly, unblockable.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first and maybe in this case second listen of the day. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're about to talk with our recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, and when he joins us, he's always brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian has been on the road this week. He was in Orlando yesterday, and for the start of the week for the All-American Bowl practices and the game yesterday, he got to watch Booker Pickett, Ryan Mack, JoJo Trader, Adarius Hayes in action. Brian, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. It was a lot of fun.
And let's start with Booker Pickett, who was one of two Hurricanes who really shined in the game. Pickett picked up a couple of sacks in that game, looked borderline unblockable, like I mentioned, Brian. What stood out to you most from the edge rusher, who is a 4-star, yet, we don't talk about him as much as, let's say, Marquise Lightfoot, but Booker Pickett looked fantastic out there.
Well, I wasn't really shocked because he had 22 sacks just as a sophomore. He had, I believe, over that number, 25 or 26, something like that as a junior. Not as many as a senior, as he played both linebacker and defensive end, but he'd already accrued all those skills, and he just applied them. He told me that they just wanted him to go after the quarterback, basically, in this game. Let's simplify, not make this too rough. And boy, did he ever. He's got a bevy of moves, man. Spin move, stop and start. He can just speed rush. And quite honestly, most of the offensive tackles were not able to handle his first step. No matter what he went with, Booker seemed to beat them with that first step. And then once he had them leaning one way or the other, he would make a cut. And oftentimes they barely touched him. So he's a really unique athlete. Both his parents went to the U, were athletes. Great kid, and it's somebody that I'm really curious to see what Lance Guidry comes up with for game to game. How do we use this guy against Team A compared to Team B? And that's why football is so fascinating.
How well do you think his current physical maturity, how quickly do you think that's going to translate to the college level?
That's what's also interesting. I've always been on him about his weight because he was hovering around 200 pounds. I used to call him peanut butter because I used to tell him I was going to make him eat peanut butter. He went from like 202, 204, like in the spring, to he's about 215 right now. He's starting to finally gain weight. And that may not sound like a lot, but a lot of great defensive ends that have played in the NFL at 260 were at this weight at that point. A lot of guys at Miami, Peter Boulware at Florida State, Justin Tuck, etc. A lot of guys were 215 out of high school. It's different when you get to college with the major college program with all those weights, everything they could do. They got so many guys. I think he'll be 235 in about a year. This season coming up, I'm hoping they can get him to 225 so it's not like overbearing. You got to adjust to how much you're carrying. But then after his first year, probably being primarily a special teams guy and a pass rusher, that year two, I think you'll see Booker do all kinds of different things. Again, Guidry's scheme is pretty complex. It takes a while to learn anyway. And he told me he's going to play the same spot that Wesley did. I'd interviewed him earlier this year at a game for Tampa Wharton where he played, and he said, that's fine with me. I'll play that. And even in that game that I was at, about half the time he came after the quarterback, about half the time he played linebacker. He moved around, and he was cool with it either way. I think you'll see him do that quite a bit for the Canes.
I like that. And so his final stats, Booker Pickett in the Under Armour All-American game, a game-high 2 sacks, as I mentioned, also had 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hurries, and a forced fumble. He played really well. You know who also played really well is Ryan Mack from St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, only a 3-star, Brian, but I saw him out there covering 4 and 5-star wide receivers, and he certainly did not look out of place. I don't think he gave up any completions in the game.
It's interesting because even myself, because I've seen Ryan for 3 seasons now, I've been a little bit surprised about him. But from talking to Rod Mack, and I had that article up on All Hurricanes a few days ago, his father, he was the one that coached all these guys, Josiah, Jeremiah, Chance, all of them coming up. And he told me, he goes, Ryan's not the biggest guy, but technique's good, et cetera. And he hadn't even played corner until his junior year of high school. He'd played running back and safety. But Chaminade and all these schools down there, STA, et cetera, they've got loaded rosters, and they had 2 safeties. One kid went to Penn State, one kid went to Florida State, and they were the safety. So he's like, okay, I want to play. And he's taken to corner very well. He even had a pass breakup against Cam Coleman, the big receiver going to Auburn. He's a 6'4", 190 guy. And he just has a knack for timing, when to reach in for the football, not to be too grabby. He doesn't get overbearing with all the little things the other guys do where they're grabbing, going down the field, you're not hiding. You're out there by yourself. It's easy to see. He doesn't do those things. He relies on his technique, and he applies it play after play, and he just starts over the next play. He's so even-keeled mentally. That might be Ryan's best attribute, because corners, man, a lot of them are high-strung. They get beat. It gets in their head. He doesn't let it happen. And here's a little stat. His 3 PBUs are like all-time high in that game. It's a tie for a record. And, I mean, obviously the DB list from the UA game is ridiculous. So congrats to Mack. He is a kid that I think is better than what I had thought, and definitely what a lot of the recruiting services thought. I'm curious to see how they use him, kind of like with Pickett. Is it going to be nickel, outside? They're going to move him around. Really astute kid. So Hurricanes got another really good football player coming in.
Now, coming up next, you guys are really going to find out why Brian is such a valuable resource, because, what people saw in the Under Armour game on Wednesday, it's only really the tip of the iceberg, right? Because the previous days of practice, which, we couldn't watch on whatever that was, one of the ESPNs we were watching that game on, we couldn't watch all the practices. Brian was there covering it in person. So even though, JoJo Trader, who did have an interception playing defense, but quieter on offense yesterday, it was a quiet day for Adarius Hayes. I do want to pick Brian's brain on what he saw from practice out of those guys, because, again, the game itself was only the tip of the iceberg. So you know what you want to do, my friends? We're only getting started. Keep it locked right here for more on Locked On Canes. I'm only getting started on Game Time. Folks, I've been trying to tell you. You're buying tickets to sporting events, concerts, musical theater, comedy shows. There is no better place than the Game Time app, especially when you're looking at those last-minute tickets. Guys, you can wake up the morning of an event, heck, an hour before the event, an hour after the event starts. Sometimes you can find the best prices at Game Time. I'm telling you, you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, which is big. Because on a lot of these ticket services, you think, oh, hey, I'm getting a $14 ticket. By the time they tack on all the fees at the end, it's like, no, I'm getting a $49 ticket. All-in prices at Game Time. They show you exactly what you're going to pay. You get views from your seat and their best price guarantee. The Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same row or section for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app. Create an account and use our code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. And guys, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe for the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It is awesome, I promise you. All right, so Brian, again, it was a little bit quiet on offense for JoJo Trader. I didn't really notice Adarius Hayes so much in the game, the Miami signee linebacker. What did you see from those two guys, the other two Canes signees, throughout the week in practices?
JoJo was extremely impressive, one-on-one, just like he's always been. It's about impossible to catch him, because if you don't get hands-on at the line of scrimmage, his twitchiness will stand out over and over and over again. He makes guys flat out miss when they go try to get a hand on him just to reroute him, it's pretty fun to watch because it's one thing to see him smoke some kid in high school who's not going to play in college.
Right.
It's another to see a kid going to the SEC or, a Big Ten school, something like that. He can do it against anybody. And from what I understand, one of the things he's going to do is play slot, at least part of the time. He can play outside as well. I don't think he's strong enough yet to play boundary, but at the same time, moving him around is going to make it even harder. And he had some tremendous catches. One hand, I don't know if you saw the video where he caught the one over his shoulder, one hand. Yeah. It's funny. The next day, I was walking out to that side of the field where Team Ice was practicing. He caught 4 one-handed throws from this guy's throwing it around in 3 minutes, just goofing around. He only catches the ball with one hand most of the time. It's not the habit that I would teach anybody, but I was talking to Rod Mack, and he said that Reggie Wayne was the guy that he saw when he was young that thought he had the best hands. He said JoJo's got better hands than Reggie Wayne, which I thought was kind of crazy. But, Reggie Wayne's a Hall of Famer. So, whatever you want to call it, JoJo has special ability. Now that it's got to find ways to get into football like everybody else because they got so many good receivers at the U coming up. But that's a great problem to have. So route running to me stood out. And then I already knew about the hands because I've seen him play so many times, but it was a nice reminder because he's not just doing it against decent players. Guys right on him, he'll catch it across this way, catches it like a baseball, but it's a football. It's just really odd because I don't know of anybody else that does it like that, and he snags it every time.
What about Adarius Hayes, who obviously big thing that jumps off the page with him is his physical maturity, right? For a guy coming out of high school, 6'4", 230, playing linebacker. What did you see from him in practices?
It's a traditional inside linebacker in terms of if you would think, when Miami was playing and coming up in Jimmy Johnson in that era, he had some smaller linebackers. They kind of changed the trend, but like Michigan or Texas or something that's 6'4", that's what he looks like. The difference is he can still really run. He'll get to the perimeter on a toss sweep or an option play or a screen. But again, he's 6'4". He was 230. He dropped down to about 225. He got hovers in that range, and he's not bad. I know Adarius well from scouting him. I lived over in Tampa, and he lived near there. Man, can he run. The biggest thing that people are going to notice when they see him play for the Canes, though, zero fear. I don't know if that's good for him long-term, but he will run into anything. He just loves to hit, and he fits that mentality inside. I'm not sure exactly how they will use him, but he does have a penchant for shooting gaps. So maybe he's going to be a little bit like Kiki Malagoa. That's possible, but I still think that with his length, he's really long. If he stands up, puts his arms out, he has tremendous length. There can be at least circumstances. Again, Guidry's defense, very multiple, has a lot of different opportunities, 3-man line, 4-man line. I think he's going to be a blitzer in some capacity. He could grow into a DN, but it's not like Miami needs him to be. Lord only knows they have enough DNs in this class. So they have to find a way to get him on the field and doing different things, and he's capable. I'm telling you, looking at him, you wouldn't think he could move like he did because he's so long. He's at least 6'4". But he can change direction. He's a thumper, and he can run.
I love it. And it's high school all-star game season. There's another big one coming up this weekend where Miami actually has 5 representatives at the All-American Bowl out in Texas. 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott, 4-star edge Marquise Lightfoot, 4-star safety Zaquan Patterson, 4-star receiver Carr, 3-star, should be 4-star offensive lineman Deryc Plazz will all be in action. I'd love Brian's take on these players as well. So, folks, you know what you want to do, man? We are not done yet. You want to keep it locked right here to this new episode of Locked On Canes. And I know you've been keeping it locked to FanDuel. Enjoy the football while we still have it, guys. National championship game coming up in college on Monday. We have week 18 in the NFL. NFL playoffs are coming up. It is not too late to get in on the action. Even though the NFL season, the regular season is wrapping up, there's still time to get in with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. So many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, which are a lot of fun. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. I encourage you to check that out. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find popular parlays and so much more. Guys, I do regret taking Bama plus 1.5 against Michigan, but they should have had it. Michigan tried to give them the game. I did win big on Washington, though, guys, and I think I'm going to ride with Washington in the national championship game. I will make that final game time decision in the coming days, and there's so much NFL action to be had. I'm down here in Miami. The Miami Dolphins are 3-point underdogs at home against the Buffalo Bills this weekend. You want to check it all out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch, or your second listen and watch. This is our second episode of the day. For the everydayers, if you want to take that everydayer experience to the next level, sign up for our exclusive Locked On Canes Insiders chat. I include the link in the show description below. The chat's been crazy for the past few weeks, tracking transfer portal quarterbacks, tracking recruiting, giving you guys breaking news, inside scoops, one-on-one questions and answers. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours. Sign up. Try it free for 14 days. Click the link in the show description below to try Locked On Canes Insiders. Then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value there on Locked On Canes Insiders. Brian Smith is with us here, our recruiting overlord, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. He's also my colleague at allhurricanes.com. Brian, something that I was writing about today on allhurricanes.com is one of the best running backs in the country, Quinshon Judkins, hit the transfer portal today. And when I first saw his name enter the portal, I'm thinking, okay, it'll probably end up at Alabama or Auburn. And then I'm reading an X post by college football reporter Barrett Sally from CBS, and he did mention Miami as a quote-unquote team to keep an eye on, along with Auburn, Alabama, and Clemson. Now, Brian, sometimes I feel like some of these transfer portal players are going to say, oh yeah, make sure you mention I'm considering Miami, because they're, trying to get whatever leverage they can. And listen, Quinshon Judkins, he is a game changer. He scored 15 or more touchdowns in his first 2 years in college. The last SEC running back to do that was Herschel Walker. So, Judkins is off to an amazing start to his career. But then I also look at Miami having 6 guys in their running back room right now, including the 2 freshmen coming in, and it's a pretty good running back room. Now, Quinshon Judkins, probably better than 99% of the running backs in the country, but Miami's got other needs. I can't really imagine Miami's going to right now try to get to the front of the line with Judkins when they need a quarterback, they need a defensive back, probably need a receiver or 2. I just don't really see it with Judkins.
Well, there's a lot to unpack with this. Number one, your point is valid. Where would Miami put him, and how would that go with the quote-unquote meshing of the roster?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that last part would be very ugly. Sometimes, as much as Mario may want it, because when you're an NFL GM, it's too bad. You got to deal with this. The transfer portal makes it much different when you bring a kid in. You gain 1, you might lose 2. Be careful for what one wishes. So here's the deal. From what I understand, Ole Miss went all in, NIL, on some kids not named Quinshon Judkins that were not already there, and that did not go over well. This is what Nick Saban and Kirby Smart have talked about, et cetera. Kirby, I'm sure a lot of people have seen that clip going around after Kirby and his team destroyed Florida State. Florida State had a lot of kids that came there, wanted to get to the NFL, but they left. They didn't play the bowl game, whatever. A million different things. Kirby had more guys bought into Georgia out of high school. It's just true. And I'm not picking on Florida State, because Miami's had to do pretty much the same thing. Maybe not quite to the same level as Florida State, but unless you recruit year, top 5 classes like Georgia has, most teams are in that same boat. But here's the reason that guys get scared. He's a dude. He's going to be a 5+ year NFL running back. Can you imagine the phone call when Wayne got that one? I would love to have been a fly on the wall, because I'm sure there's a lot of conversation in that was not publicly admittable. Because you're going to be very angry. You can't replace that guy. And what are the odds that he doesn't end up at Bama or Auburn, 2 schools that you are rivals with? So he's, but he made that choice. So I don't think Miami would go after him. Normally, yeah. But Miami's running back room is ridiculous. So I just, I don't know what Mark Fletcher's injury is. I hope he's ready for next year. I haven't heard the extent of that. If you want to you've heard anything, fire away. But
I haven't either. All I know is his X-rays were negative. That only rules out, a certain number of things. So I don't know what is going on there.
But even if hypothetically, if he had been, you still got 5 other running backs, and all of them were highly touted. I mean, you should be okay. The question with Miami is if they take another guy that's obviously still looking for a quarterback, what position? I would still think D-line or corner would be a possibility. Maybe an offensive lineman if it's the perfect fit, but I think they're good there. They really don't have much. Maybe a great tight end that can be flexible as an H-back or something, but that's not a high NIL spot. I don't think Miami needs to mess with it all that much. It's got to be the perfect fit. They just need to find that quarterback.
Exactly. And, I don't want Miami to prioritize, as good as Quinshon Judkins is, do not prioritize him over a quarterback right now. Like that would be not a smart decision. I mentioned that there's another big high school all-star game coming up on the 6th. That's Saturday, Brian. And this is going to be a good one for Miami fans to tune into. Justin Scott, Marquise Lightfoot, Zaquan Patterson, Carr, and Deryc Plazz all in action. You could talk a little bit about them, Brian, especially Deryc Plazz, because I think he was like a later invite to this game. He's been shooting up everybody's radar recently. So I credit Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal for kind of discovering Deryc Plazz before anybody nationally realized how good he is.
Miami thinks he can play offensive tackle at the highest level. I mean, he's an athlete. And I was at one of his playoff games, and they were going against Monarch, who has pretty darn good, pretty good defense overall, and they've got some Power 5 kids. He's able to seal the edge. He's able to get outside guys that were starting to play on his perimeter. He's able to get down the field and find DBs and linebackers in space, which is hard because, they're smaller and quicker than you. He's able to hang in there at 280 pounds. That's a big man, and he's not fat at all. He's lean. He's put together. He'll be 305 or something. He's not going to be one of these 350 kids that you see at Georgia or whatever, but he's an athlete. Miami needs all the pass protectors they can get, and if nothing else, he's a guy that could be the quickest guard on the roster. They'll find a spot for him. Also a great kid. I think he'll be pretty easily coached. Alex Mirabal definitely gets after it, but as Alex has told me before, like the really good ones want that. And, if they don't, then it's not going to work out anyway. Miami found a kid that also had offers from a ton of schools. Penn State wanted him. They've got a good offensive line. This is not just a fly-by-night kid, but he did rise a little later. I'm not really sure why. It's kind of weird because, I watched him. I'm like, I'm not sure what the late hurry was. Really good athlete. He's 280 pounds, and he's playing at Jacksonville Mandarin. They're playing against teams. That's a good program. They've always had kids. So I think Miami found a really good offensive lineman, and probably somebody's going to be a multi-year starter.
What about, obviously Justin Scott was the highest rated commit and signee that Miami has. So everybody knows this guy is really good, but what should Miami fans be looking for in his game in this All-American Bowl? And how quickly do you think he can get on the field at Miami?
Well, the second part there is immediately. I'll just go ahead and end that. I mean, he's a little different than most kids his size. He's, for those that don't know, Justin's roughly 310, give or take. He's a wide body and all that. But here's the really important thing. Forget football. He's been a proactive, really good basketball player in Chicago. Chicago is a basketball city first. It is. Michael Jordan and all that. And he's been a hooper for a while. One of the guys that I know scouted him has been to see him play basketball multiple times. And it's because he can move his feet. He's 3'10" and can play. So that's a good sign. The other thing is his hand power. Like when he hits somebody and he says, okay, I'm going to bull rush, he's going to put the power. Very few guys can handle him at the high school level, even down there. I mean, there's some dudes up front in that game. There's a clip I saw yesterday, I believe, where he just walked the guy back to the bag, and it's like, okay, maybe the guy didn't use good technique or whatever, but that's still a 300-pound man that you're moving against his will. That's not easy. And those kids all know that those videos are flying. Mm-hmm. They're going to give everything they can because they don't want to be YouTubed. That's a really good sign. Final thing is, like every other young D lineman, and this is what Taylor and Big Joe got to work with him, just adding more moves. He's going to walk you back to the quarterback once in a while, but to be great, it's just the bevy of moves, mixing them up. Warren Sapp and different guys that played at Miami, you didn't know what was coming, and they were a great athlete. That's when you have true problems. He's going to have to add more to his repertoire, but athletically and power, he's what you're looking for. He's a guy that should be a 3-and-out kind of player.
Yeah, there's a player who's going to be in action at the All-American Bowl who hasn't announced where he's signing, and that's Zay Mincy. A lot of people ask me about him. He's going to be announcing I think he's already signed somewhere, but he's just kept it under wraps. He's going to be announcing during the All-American Bowl. My expectation is he is probably going to Alabama. Brian, is that also what you're hearing? Do you think he may have already signed that Alabama letter of intent?
Yeah, it looks like Crimson Tide from everybody I've spoken to. I do not expect that to end well for Miami, but they tend to do well at DB with Nick still being the guy that kind of runs the DB room. So yeah, it'll be Bama.
Yeah, no question about that. All right. I appreciate your time as always. And guys, Brian does an awesome job at allhurricanes.com. Make sure you're checking out the site. I write there as well, post a lot of our videos there. So make sure you check out allhurricanes.com. Follow Brian on X at FBScout_Florida. Thank you so much for the time and insight as always.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, sir. Have a great one.
All right, guys, make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe wherever you get your pods. We're on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.